Hi, I'm John Doherty, and today we're doing a faults and fixes video on the arms and hands, and we'll cover what they do at setup, backswing, transition, downswing, impact, and finish. So at the start, at P1, I'd like to see that right elbow slightly flexed and the left arm straight. And it's real easy to do that because we want the shoulders open at address. And if you just have the hands slightly in front of the golf ball and you open your torso just a little bit to the left, it's easier for the right elbow to flex. And the reason why is the closer the hands get to a shoulder joint, the more that particular arm flexes. So you can see my hands are over my right shoulder. My right elbow's flex more than my left arm because my hands are further from my left shoulder. So at P1, right elbow slightly flexed, left arm straight. So going into the backswing, what you see a lot of people do, and probably 90-some% of people in the backswing, they control the arms with the shoulders going back. So you'll see a shoulder turn style takeaway where the arms are right arm is fairly straight and the left arm is straight, and there's not much wrist cock this way. So you'll see the shoulders going right off the bat turning, and the hips are sort of being pulled back by the shoulders. Now the problem with this motion is, how do I get the pressure back into my right heel where I need it to be without having to move my upper body, my center of mass, over my right leg? So there's the problem. Second problem with turning real early is, if I turn real early, by halfway back, I've already turned my torso and shoulders some 90 degrees. What do I do the rest of the way at the top of the swing? Odds are, what you see most of the time is people lift. Because when you turn and extend early, it lifts your torso up. So if I wanted to turn the most, I'm going to stand up the most this way because it's easier to rotate than being in a flexed position. This is why keeping the torso down makes it harder to turn the torso and trunk, but that's why we focus on the hips, letting the hips take care of the business. So another thing you see in a takeaway a lot of the times is the arms working behind the body like a lawnmower. So what happens when you see this move is nothing with the hips and really nothing with the torso is happening. So it's real armsy motion halfway back, and you're just not, again, loading that pressure in that right heel correctly. So what I'm looking for in the swing is the hips and knees to trigger the backswing, and then the arms and hands to work in a flexing position with the right elbow and a fanning position with the right elbow. So this is called external rotation, and in TPI you'll see this test a lot because a lot of people, as we get older, have a hard time working the right forearm around the elbow joint like a baseball pitcher because the rotator cuff just gets real tight. So a good stretch is just to see if you can move your forearm around your elbow joint without arching your back to help you. So you notice I'm keeping my back very stable, not trying to let it help, and I'm just working my external rotation. The flexing, I've never seen too many people have a hard time doing this. So in the backswing, to start off, we know that this action has to be happening. Now we're going to, what do we do with the arms and hands? Well, the right hand is going to slightly bend back this way as the right elbow slightly flexes and the right forearm fans around the elbow joint this way. So I'm going to get my hips going. And you'll notice when my right elbow fans around the elbow joint, my left arm pops off my body a little bit. But my right elbow is maintaining all its pressure points on my torso this way. So now I'm going to get my knee action, kicks it off. My right wrist is slightly bending back, very similar to like you're shaking hands. And I see a lot of swings where the right hand gets palmed down and the club face is too close and the shaft path starts working vertical and then the arms lift. So right hand, very much like you're taking your hand going at normal grip where your right hand's vertical to shaking someone's hand at P2. And that's done with just a slight elbow flexion, slight right forearm motion around the elbow joint. Now another thing to look at is where the elbow is in relationship on the torso. So in the swing, the elbow does work back to the seam this way. And in the model that we're working on, it's going to do it later. So it's not going to happen right off the bat and work towards the seam. We're going to go ahead and get the hips and knees starting to shift the pressure. We're keeping the torso down. The right forearm is going to flex and fan to the right. And then as the hips finish going, this is when I'm already in external rotation as my right forearm is worked around the elbow joint. And you can see that because this would be internal and this would be more external. It's going to external rotation. You'll see the bicep and forearm take an angle out to the right instead of keeping it either straight or in internal rotation. So you're going to let that fan, and that helps you go ahead and get that hard position that we talked about done with early in the swing. So I'm right there with my elbow at P2 in external rotation. So I'm not going to keep it in internal and then have to do it later in the backswing. I'm going to knock it out early and then be able to focus on the transition and the transfer of pressure, the more important stuff, and the hands and arms coming down than I am trying to get this club shallow with my right arm. And then the golf swing, the left arm or your lead arm is basically inert. It's like a piece of rope. So the left arm is going to do whatever that right arm tells it to do. So another common mistake in the backswing is having that lead arm too active. So you'll see a lot of lead when people start pronating that forearm or externally rotating that left shoulder too much and that lead arm's too active. You'll see that left arm come up off the chest. You'll see that club shaft get real flat. And this is just a world of problems because you really can't shallow much from here anymore. You're going to have to steepen it. And more times than not, that's going to keep steepening all the way down in the downswing. So, all right, we got the right elbow working around in external rotation at P2, and then P2 to P3, P4, that right elbow is going to work behind or towards the seam of my shirt as my hips finish up their job. You're going to see the full front part of the pants. The right hip is behind the heel. My torso is down, and then this is going to keep working back to the seam of my shirt. So you don't want the right arm to stay in front of your torso this way. There's no power in this, especially having the body this turned and the arms that already forward closer to impact. There's nothing you can do from here. So we want that right elbow in an external rotation at the top and going back to the seam. Now you notice with the arms that my right elbow didn't lift too much, about 5 or 6 inches from the torso. So as that's going back, I'm just working it around my body this way without much lift. So if you lift in the backswing, you can't hit from there. It'd be way too steep. You would have to make a move and shallow it in transition. And a lot of people, when they lift their arms, and I like to use the right shoulder as a reference point. So when I'm looking at a swing, I like to see the hands deeper than the right shoulder and the hands not above the right shoulder or towards the head. I like to see them deeper than the right shoulder. And then the club shaft, I like to see it pointing it slightly across the line or down the line, not laid off. Laid off is going to make you want to steepen that club coming down. All right, so in the backswing, the right elbow has moved from the front part of your torso to the seam. It's an external rotation. It hasn't lifted, and there's flex. So if we look at my right elbow position here, I'm not straight, and I see this a lot too in backswings. I see people with the right arm way too straight in the backswing. There's no power in this. So if you had this type of look, imagine trying to hit someone with no right elbow flexion. So if you had your right arm that straight, you would have to add flex coming down in the downswing. All right, so we're at P4. At the top, we have about 80 degrees of flexion from the bicep area. And that muscle, the bicep muscle, causes flexion this way. Straightening the right arm is the tricep muscle. So if you got too much straight, your right triceps engaged too much. And then there's people that get it too flexed at the top. So you don't want to get it where your angle between your right forearm and your right biceps 20 or 30 degrees because this is way too steep. So I see this quite a bit in the older crowd. So in the older crowd, that flexibility starts to go in the right shoulder, and those elbows start to those forearms get real close to the bicep, and you start seeing the right arm bent and the left arm bent. Well, we know the left arm's bent because the torso's not down. And when this is too flexed this way, this gets the club too steep. So if I make the transition move that we've been talking about, that I want to see with getting the left shoulder and left knee over the left foot, it's going to pop your shaft out on the guillotine plane, way too steep. And you're going to know that. So then what happens is you're going to start tilting back this way. and then you're going to carry that right elbow bend too much into impact. So you can see right here at P6, that's almost 90 degrees of elbow bend. So at this point, you can't hit the ball this way. You're going to have to either straighten the right arm or continue rotating. And you can see this is pretty similar to Furyk. So it is possible to do this, to have the chest and shoulders this open. And the more open you are with your torso, the more that right elbow will be flexed at impact. Now, very accurate way to play. We know Furyk does really well in the courses that are tight with high rough. So it's a very accurate way, because the more the right arm is straightening at impact, the more the radius is lengthening, the more the club face is closing. So you start seeing the Hall of Fame all have a flexed right arm at impact, which is going to be a very quiet club face, very consistent turf interaction, very shallow, instead of having that right arm firing, usually because the body is tilted back too much. And that goes into an entirely different pattern called the hitting pattern. And I use Greg Norman and a few others as models for that. And maybe down the road we'll talk about the hitting pattern. But this is the swinging pattern. So we're at P4, and now the arms have a very important role. Now in the model we teach, there's pressure points in the right index finger. So the pressure point at the top that I like to see is where it's going to be at the mid knuckle in your right hand. And I like to see it, and there's not much wrist cock with that. So if you got the pressure point in the mid knuckle at the top, your left arm and club shaft is probably about 90 degrees. What I like to see in the downstroke in that first P4 to P5 is a arm and hand acceleration. So what happens with that is that pressure point goes from the mid knuckle to the top knuckle this way. And that's done by, you can see I'm not cocking my right wrist. I'm letting the shaft literally rotate from the mid knuckle to the top knuckle because my left hand cocked. And that's why we like the long left hand thumb, the right hand sitting very high up on the left hand thumb. Not a lot of contact with the right hand grip. If you grip it with a lot of the right hand is going to want to dump that wrist cock out. So this is that lag. The golf machine actually calls it the secret of the golf swing. So lag pressure is the secret of the golf swing. Mid knuckle goes to top knuckle when the left wrist cocks. So the move that we like to see in transition is hand speed and wrist cock. And when I make that wrist cock with my left hand, that pressure point goes to the top knuckle in my right hand. And this hand speed at the top is quick. So these hands are not pulling. We're not going from the top and pulling this way. We are literally sending the hands down, and very similar to like a pulley system going at an angle. So the hand path is going downwards, and this is an acceleration that gets the club head speed starting to rev up, and then at the bottom of that pulley, that stick goes around super quick at the bottom of the pulley. So a lot of physics there with things like parametric acceleration. But the more lag you have, we want quicker hand speed to get that lag down. Another interesting thing you'll see when you get that increase in lag is that right arm will straighten. So as that pressure gets left into P5, I've loaded my left arm more on my chest. My right elbow is flexed a little bit more. That pressure point from my mid knuckle in the right hand loads the left wrist cock a little more. And then that hand speed, when I got the pressure over my left foot, that hand speed goes down really quick. And that straightens the right arm and gets the left arm off the shoulder plane. So at the top, my left arm was on my chest. When I've moved my pressure to my left foot, it got even more on my chest. And now with that pressure in the ground, I'm going to start the acceleration, that lag and that hands going down, coming down into P6. And you'll notice at P6, also too, there wasn't a whole lot of turning going on like you think in the golf swing in a two-dimensional sense. So there's not all this rotation with the hips and the shoulders. The emphasis is going to be on getting over the left leg in P4 to P4.5 in that launching pad position, where that's really loading the right elbow, left wrist cock, left arm, loading the ground. There's a slight little layoff move, and that's that final beta torque, kind of going a little negative beta torque, or golf machine calls it number 3 accumulator, but it's just a little bit. So this is number 3 accumulator or beta torque this way, and when we go the opposite, it's a little negative beta torque, which shallows that shaft a little bit. adds that even more power that you can use at the golf ball. So we're loading it in. The hand speed is going down. So I'm not pulling. And the big mistake is to take from the top in that lag and to pull. Well, if you pull like that, your torso tends to go back in axis tilt too much. And this gets into a whole other type of pattern, which is more, it's called right arm swinging. So if we get the right elbow starts pulling in towards our belly button, this tilts the axis, and this is not a very popular way to swing, but there's examples on the PGA Tour of this. And then the right elbow almost becomes the center of the stroke, and then you'll see a very flippy release right past impact. So if the right elbow is not pulling down, it's the hand speed coming out this way, the right arm straightening. So at P5, all that stuff's loaded this way, the ground's loaded, you've loaded the accumulators. P5 to P6, that right arm is going to straighten, and it's a fast motion. And while you're doing that P5 and dropping it, you're feeling that lag stay on that top knuckle. Another thing with the right arm when this is happening is that the right forearm is staying supinated. So we're not pronating or firing down on the right arm. That causes the club shaft to steepen too much. So as we're doing this, you're straightening the right arm. The hand speed is quick, but we're keeping that right arm supinated like a karate chop down plane. So we are not taking it and straightening it and turning over the shaft this way. That would tip you out way too early, called shanks and pulls. So it's coming down this way like an on-plane karate chop into P6. And an interesting alignment that you'll see with Hogan and Mac O'Grady, Sam Snead, is that at P6, their right elbow, their right arm is flexed about 120 degrees and almost pointing at the golf ball. So it's almost an on-plane right forearm at P6, where at the top of the swing, let's say they were at 80 degrees, that tells you how much that right arm is straightened in a short period of time from P4 to P6. And that is a tremendous amount of club head speed getting going real quick with the hand speed this way. Well, as that hand speed was quick from, say, P4, P5, P6, it starts to slow down at P6. And then other things pick up on it. So that speed's established. Then at that point, you're getting out of the way of the ground with the left shoulder, the left knee, and you're going to use that speed right around that P6 area to deliver that golf club on the sweet spot with a very consistent club face and a flexed right arm. So you don't want to continue straightening till that right arm is locked. This is where it gets dangerous. So it's a little tricky that the right arm is straightening this way, but that speed of the hand stops. So there's a thing you'll see with some people is they have a term they call over acceleration. So over acceleration would be the hand speed going past the golf ball this way. And a lot of times that happens from people that have a very smooth transition, not much happening, and they realize I got to hit this ball 250 yards. So at the last second around P5.5, they turn on the gas with the right arm and they come into impact with the hands way too far forward, club face wide open, and usually hit a push cut. If they make that their pattern, then they have to come up with a way to square the club face with the hands that far forward. And they tend to get into leaning back way too much to try to make the ball go in the air because there's no loft on the club. All right, so we covered having that right elbow too flexed, coming down. I mean, when you're doing that, there's just no acceleration with the hands and arms. So your club head speed is going to be a little less, even though if you look like Jim Furyk, you're going to hit some frozen ropes. We talked about the right arm not pronating, coming down this way. We talked about the hand speed increasing from P4.5 to P5.5 to P6, slowing down. And also when that right arm is straightening, that's like a karate chop. So we're not turning it over and trying to roll the club. You're going to feel at impact that right arm is still underneath that left arm. The left arm will be straight, and if you're filming from down the line, you should see the right arm bent about 150 degrees, left arm straight, and you can see that my chest is open some 45 degrees at impact. So that speed that we delivered, we're getting out of the way of the ground on that with the left shoulder, left knee, and then controlling the sweet spot in the club face with that right arm under the left arm. And then even into the finish, I like to see that right arm still underneath the left arm, just to make sure that ball starts out in front of us. And at the finish too, it's not like you're holding these wrists. So these wrists are going back from maximum bent back to minimal bit back, with the hands just slightly in front of the golf ball. And all that's really taken care of with hand speed. So it's not something you got to purposely try to flip it right at impact to get this way. That really is creating the hand speed early, letting those hands slow down, letting that speed of that club that you've created early in the swing transfer into impact with the pivot, left knee, left shoulder getting out of the way, and that right arm making sweet spot contact. All right, so get to work on the arms, do some video on practice swings and see how it looks, and catch me next time on the next faults and fixes. Thank you.